Welcome to this tutorial in which we're going to have a look at powers which are fractional, but instead of 1 over n it will be in the form of m over n. So looking at 2/3, powers of 2/3, minus 3 over 2, and so on. Okay, before we apply the actual rules, I'd like us to consider the first question, where we have to evaluate the cube root of 125 squared. Now, without a calculator, if you try to square 125, you're going to get 15,625, and to cube root that is not easy at all without a calculator. So the way forward then is to think about the rule that if you have the nth root of a, it's a to the power of 1 over n, and here we're having a cube root. So the cube root means a power of 1/3, and you've already met that in the last tutorial. Now, what can we do to solve this problem easily? Well, if we go back to the rule a to the power of m to the power of n, if you remember, it's the same as a to the power of n raised to the power of m. We can interchange the powers, because the end result is a to the power of m times n. So here we do exactly that. We interchange the 2 and the 3rd. We get 125 to the power of the 3rd, and then we square it. Of course, the power of the 3rd means the cube root of 125, which is quite simple to do. And then we square the answer. Cube root of 125 is 5, so we're squaring 5, we get 25. 5 times 5 is 25. Well, if we look at that again and multiply the powers using this rule here, then we'll get 125 to the power of 2/3, because 2 lots of 1/3 is 2/3. Now if we look at the process we've just done, coming to this one here, we can see that we cube root it. That tells you to cube root, and this one tells you to square it. Okay, well, so for example, if you have 64 to the power of 2/3, what would you have to do? Well, the denominator tells me to cube root 64 and then square it. The cube root of 64, what number do you multiply by itself? 3 times to get 64. Well, it's 4, and if you square the 4 you get 16. Okay, we'll be applying that rule again a bit later on. Let's just have a look at this one here and use the same idea as in number 1. It's the 5th root, so it's 32 cubed to the power of 1/5. Again, if you try to work out 32 cubed without a calculator, you get 32,768. And it's not easy to work out the 5th root of that without a calculator. So interchange the powers, you get 32 to the 1/5 raised to the power of 3. And the 5th root, that's what the power of a 5th means, of 32, and then we're going to cube that. The 5th root of 32 is 2, and 2 cubed is 8. Okay? Now you can follow this rule if the question is in that form. You can follow this process. But in some cases, it's like number 3. It's already written as a fractional power, 2/3. So what we need to do then is to look at the a to the power of m over n, and look at this one here, the nth root of a to the power of m. What is n in this case? It's 3. So n is 3, and what is m? 2. So the denominator of the fraction tells us the root. It's the root of 1,000, and then we square it. That's what the numerator tells us to do. Okay? I think of that being the upper level, and this one being the lower level, the 3. The 2 is the upper level, and the 3 is the lower level. The cube root of 1,000 is 10, and if you square 10, what do you get? 100. Okay? So what happens here? Well, we have a negative power, so we need to come back to this rule here and write it as 1 over 64 to the power of 3 over 2. And then we apply the rule we've just applied in number 3. It's 1 over, the denominator is a 2, so it's the square root of 64, and the numerator is a 3, so we cube. And the square root of 64 is 8, so we have to cube 8. And of course, there's no reason why this should not come up in a non-calculated paper. It's likely to. You'd have to work out 8 cubed, which is 512. Well, 8 squared is 64, so it's just a question of multiplying 64 by 8, which should not be difficult. Okay, but that would be the answer, 1 over 512. The next one, we have a fraction. So, the denominator of the fraction at the top, the power, is a 3. So that's a cube root. It's the third root of 8 over 125, and the result is then what? Squared. Okay, so that 3 there, and that 2 there. What's the cube root of 8? It's 2. What's the cube root of 125? It's 5. So we're going to square 2/5. 2 squared is 4, and 5 squared is 25. And that would be the answer. Okay? Right, so let's have a look at some more questions. This is a typical GCSE and C1 question. The power is negative, and we have a fraction. In one of the tutorials, I showed you how to use this rule here, that if you have a fraction raised to a negative power, swap the numerator and denominator, turn it upside down, and change the power to a positive power. So that's the first move, is to get that power, to be positive. So we turn the fraction upside down and change the power to a positive. Now don't forget that the denominator of the fractional power tells you what root to do. Well, it's 2, so it's square root. It's the square root of 25 over 16, and the numerator of the fraction, the fractional power, tells us to cube that. Okay? Now, the square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 16 is 4. If you cube that, 5 cubed is 125, 4 cubed is 64. This is good enough. You don't have to write as a mixed number. You can if you want to, if they ask you to. Okay? This next one is a mixed number. So first we need to change it to an improper fraction or a top-heavy fraction. Well, 1 9/16 is 25/16 raised to the power of 3 over 2. Again, 3 over 2 means square root, that's that number, of 25 over 16, and then we cube it. The square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 16 is 4. Very similar to the end of that last one. We're going to cube that, and we get 125 over 64. 4 cubed is 64, 5 cubed is 125. Okay? Now, I brought him some algebra. It should really say here, simplify. So, it's 64, y to the power of 6. What root are we going to use? Well, it's the third root, because of the 2/3, the denominator is a 3, so it's cube root of that expression, all of it squared. The cube root of 64 is 4. What's the cube root of y to the power of 6? Well, do you remember what we tried to do? You divide this number by that number. and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So you get a y squared there, and we've got to square that. If you want, you can look at it this way. It's y to the power of 6, and cube root means power of a third. 6 times a third, or 6/3, is 2. So that's where the y squared comes from. If we square the 4, we get 16. If we square the y squared, 2 times 2 is 4, and that would be the answer. Okay? This time we are simplifying. We've got a fraction, and can you see what the root is going to be? Well, it's going to be a cube root because of this 3 here. And then what we're going to do after that, we're going to square it. The cube root of 125 is 5. The cube root of a cubed is a. 3 divided by 3 is 1. Cube root of 27 is 3. The cube root of b to the power of 6. 6 divided by 3 is 2, so it's b squared. And then we need to square that. 5 squared is 25. Be careful not to do 5 times 2. A squared, 9 for 3 squared. B squared to the power of 2 is b to the power of 4, and that would be the answer. Finally, I know this has gone above 10 minutes, we have a fraction and a negative power. So we use this rule here to turn it upside down first. So it's 49y squared over 25a to the power of 8 to the power of 3 over 2 would make the power positive. This time, this 2 here tells us it's a square root, okay, of 49y squared over 25a to the power of 8. And when there, what do? We cube it. That's to do with this 3 here. If we square root 49, we get 7. Square root y squared, we get y. Square root 25, we get 5. Square root a to the power of 8 divided by 2, you get 4. And then we've got to cube that. 7 cubed is 343. Y to the power of 3. 5 cubed is 125. A to the power of 4 raised to the power of 3, multiply the powers, you get a to the power of 12. Well, I've run out of time now. It's 13 minutes, sorry about that. I hope you found this useful. On to the next tutorial. Thanks for listening. Take care.